around goes the little blue top, whirling and turning with never a stop. Dappled with white and dappled with brown, the little blue top keeps a turning around. Oh, there's wild raging oceans and proud mountain chains, green peaceful valleys and wide grassy plains, families of life that each setting contains, dolphins and spiders and tigers and cranes. Oh, there's red men and white men and yellow men too, black men and brown men, to name just a few. Men green with envy and others were blue, and ladies for all these and babies just new. Around and around goes the little blue top, whirling and turning with never a stop. Dappled with white and dappled with brown, the little blue top keeps a turning around. There's teachers and lawyers and medicine men, places to go to and people who've been, others who stay home and tend to the shop, and they all whirl and turn on the little blue top. There's men who are greedy and men who don't care, and they're foul in our rivers and poison in our air. And if all of the rest of us don't make 'em stop, they might end all the life on the little blue top. Around and around goes the little blue top, whirling and turning with never a stop. Dappled with white and dappled with brown, the little blue top keeps a turning around. Once the forest stretched from Kansas to the rocky coast of Maine, surrounded fertile fields and valleys on the way. But we chopped and cleared to make more farms and destroyed the watershed, and the rain come down and washed our soil away. Yes, and can't nobody fix it when it's gone, gone, gone. You'll just have to do without it from then on. Why can't everybody know we'll rise to what we sow. Yes, and can't nobody fix it when it's gone. Once the great southwestern dust bowl was carpeted with grass, and herds of creatures moved across its face. But overgrazing and misuse by cattlemen who didn't care have turned it to a dry and lifeless place. Yes, and can't nobody fix it when it's gone, gone, gone. We'll just have to do without it from then on. Why can't everybody know you got to reap just what you sow? Yes, and can't nobody fix it when it's gone. Well, you think we'd learn our lesson from the losses of the past? You think we'd try to keep the things that still remain? But from the redwoods to the Everglades, bulldozers are rolling, tearing up the things we can't get back again. Yes, and can't nobody fix 'em when they're gone, gone, gone. We'll just have to do without 'em from then on. Your great-grandson might never see the beauty that touched you and me. Can't nobody fix 'em when it's gone.
The great question of the 70s is, shall we surrender to our surroundings, or shall we make our peace with nature and begin to make reparations for the damage we have done to our air, to our land, and to our water? Restoring nature to its natural state is a cause beyond party and beyond factions. It has become a common cause of all the people of this country. It is a cause of particular concern to young Americans, because they, more than we, will reap the grim consequences of our failure to act on programs which are needed now if we are to prevent disaster later. Clean air, clean water, open spaces, these should once again be the birthright of every American. If we act now, they can be. We still think of air as free, but clean air is not free, and neither is clean water. The price tag on pollution control is high. Through our years of past carelessness, we incurred a debt to nature, and now that debt is being called. The program I shall propose to Congress will be the most comprehensive and costly program in this field in America's history. It is not a program for just 1 year. A year's plan in this field is no plan at all. This is a time to look ahead, not a year, but 5 years or 10 years, whatever time is required to do the job. I shall propose to this Congress a $10 billion nationwide clean waters program to put modern municipal waste treatment plants in every place in America where they are needed to make our waters clean again, and do it now. We have the industrial capacity, if we begin now to build them all within 5 years, this program will get them built within 5 years. As our cities and suburbs relentlessly expand, those priceless open spaces needed for recreation areas accessible to their people are swallowed up, often forever. Unless we preserve these spaces while they are still available, we will have none to preserve. Therefore, I shall propose new financing methods for purchasing open space and parklands now before they are lost to us. The automobile is our worst polluter of the air. Adequate control requires further advances in engine design and fuel composition. We shall intensify our research, set increasingly strict standards, and strengthen enforcement procedures, and we shall do it now. We can no longer afford to consider air and water common property, free to be abused by anyone without regard to the consequences. Instead, we should begin now to treat them as scarce resources, which we are no more free to contaminate than we are free to throw garbage into our neighbor's yard. This requires comprehensive new regulations. It also requires that to the extent possible, the price of goods should be made to include the costs of producing and disposing of them without damage to the environment. Now, I realize that the argument is often made that there's a fundamental contradiction between economic growth and the quality of life, so that to have one, we must forsake the other. The answer is not to abandon growth, but to redirect it. For example, we should turn toward ending congestion and eliminating smog, the same reservoir of inventive genius that created them in the first place. Continued vigorous economic growth provides us with the means to enrich life itself and to enhance our planet as a place hospitable to man. Each individual must enlist in this fight if it is to be won. It has been said that no matter how many national parks and historical monuments we buy and develop, the truly significant environment for each of us is that in which we spend 80% of our time, in our homes, in our places of work, the streets over which we travel. Street litter, run-down parking strips and yards, dilapidated fences, broken windows, smoking automobiles, dingy working places, all should be the object of our fresh view. We have been too tolerant of our surroundings and too willing to leave it to others to clean up our environment. It is time for those who make massive demands on society to make some minimal demands on themselves. Each of us must resolve that each day he will leave his home, his property, the public places of the city or town a little cleaner, a little better, a little more pleasant for himself and those around him. With the help of people, we can do anything, and without their help, we can do nothing.
In the dynamics of living systems, of which we are certainly a part, creation is always concomitant with destruction. Pollution is the result of undesirable destruction of life's processes and resources. Today, the pollution load on the Earth's environment has reached the point where we may be setting in motion irreversible changes in our ecosystem, which may well result in the demise of life as we now know it. The current ecological crisis demands that the Church respond to the interrelated problems of burgeoning populations, air and water pollution, and solid waste disposal, as well as such things as noise pollution. But look around this world of ours, and what do you see? There are fantastic teeming centers of living entities existing the world over. Certainly areas of the tropics proliferate growth more rapidly than the Arctic regions. But even the deserts yield evidence of organized communities of organisms. More important, though, is the interdependence of one living form on another. Investigators are awed by the intricate web of life that exists on Earth, with living, competing creatures coexisting in a delicate balance with the natural resources and with the constituents of the water, air, and land, as well as with the climate. Despite the relatively tenuous balances of power between living groups, there is remarkable resilience in mixed groups of organisms, and they often are able to survive rather severe shifts in living conditions. This resilience feature has, thus far, been one of the key factors allowing mankind to persist on Earth in spite of man's lack of consideration for the environment in which he lives. This resilience, or tenacity for life, is not uniform throughout the various living forms, and resistance or breakdown sometimes occurs in the food chain. Thus it may seem strange that the eggshell was the problem area for the proud eagle, who became the terminal receptor for pesticides. The concentration factor of such refractory or slowly degradable products as DDT in the food chain is one of the remarkable perversities of some of the wonder products invented by man for creating the better life. Pesticides dumped in lakes at the rate of only 1 pound of pesticide per million pounds of water can be concentrated while traveling up the food chain to the higher forms of life, so that birds and mammals obtain concentrations in the order of hundreds of parts per million in their fatty tissues. Man, by his creations and by his very numbers, now is capable of destroying nature as we know it. To be sure, man has from prehistoric times created pollution problems. For reasonable numbers of men spread over the earth, nature is capable of reabsorbing man's natural waste products back into the environment. But man's recent skyrocketing populations and his present abilities to create an almost endless variety of products provide situations where natural mechanisms for waste assimilation are taxed to extinction. News stories are relatively frequent now on the death of rivers and lakes, on oil spills, and on the smog conditions which choke our cities. The Gulf Coast experiences red tides ever more frequently, with their decimation of fish populations in the area. Our hope is that man will find the desire to reclaim the quality of the environment before it is too late to save the ecosystems on which man's life depends. In the United States, man has found that his wealth has created the potential for even greater insult to the environment, for his affluency breeds waste. As income increases, our citizens are wont to throw away even greater quantities of material, just because it is convenient, or easy, or the material is out of style. Take, for example, the solid waste problem. Each American throws out over 5.5 pounds per day, with larger amounts from the richer residential areas. The amount per day is climbing steadily and is expected to reach over 10 pounds per person per day within 10 years. The picture is not all bleak. But the thing to think about as Christians is what are the most reasonable alternatives to present practices? What are the highest and best uses of our resources? How can we reuse materials? Does everything have to be in a throwaway container? How can we influence others to take care of the things we have? How can we save our wildlife refuges and our streams and our farmlands and forests? How can we change our farming and living practices so that people live more compatibly with the environment and so that everyone practices good housekeeping? All these questions are for you to answer as responsible Christians, as groups working in your community, in your state, and in your nation. For we are citizens of the world, and the waste products we spew into the atmosphere travel round the world so that many others beyond our shores suffer for the things we do. Let us make sure that we as Christians are taking responsible care of all the things with which we deal. Let us take leadership as Christians in this world of today so that we will be known as responsible guardians of God's living green earth, so that our grandchildren will yet have a living world of beauty in which to exist.
Martin Luther King once said that through our scientific genius, we have made of the world a neighborhood. Now, through our moral and spiritual genius, we must make of it a brotherhood. No matter how great, our technology cannot produce more land, more water, or more air. Nor has our technology produced enough houses, enough hospitals, or enough schools. But pollution of our air and water and our land is not the whole story of the urban environment. The deterioration of our cities' human resources has been just as relentless, just as vicious, and just as ignored. Although we lead the world in medical research, we have dropped to 20th in longevity and 16th in infant mortality. Adequate health care is delivered to the city in shamefully meager doses. Our natural and human resources are threatened by the very technology that we are told has made America strong. Our technology has reached a point in its development where it is producing more kinds of things than we really want, more kinds of things than we really need, and more kinds of things than we can live with. We have forgotten that our primary goal as a nation is to create a society where each individual has an equal chance to fulfill his own potential. Our goal has never been to create a society where human greatness or environmental quality takes a back seat to technological change. And so we must find a way to change. We must make America's technological capacity work for the preservation of our human and natural resources rather than their destruction. We must expand the environmental conscience to include the quality of the total human environment. Our challenge is no less than to force a wholesale change in our values within the next 10 years. We must trade high horsepower for clean vehicles, fast planes for clean air, highways for open space, We must exchange rockets to the moon for medical care, atomic energy for housing, new weapons for education. In the past, the needs of our human and natural environment have been last in line. They are fed only after the appetite of our consumption-oriented, profit-motivated society has been satisfied. And so the pendulum has swung too far. In effect, America must stop on a dime and make a 180-degree turn. Not away from technological growth, but toward new uses of that growth. Enough people must shout for a long enough time that our total environment is at stake, that it will not be saved by words alone.
Now, what do you say we all get together on a song? How about that great song by Woody Guthrie, This Land Is Your Land? Or should I say, with apologies to Woody Guthrie for this version? Okay, here we go, folks. This land is your land, this land is my land, from polluted ocean to congested island, from the plundered forests to the oil-soaked beaches. This land was wrecked by you and me, driving bumper to bumper on that littered highway. I smelled above me that smoggy skyway, saw through the billboards the ravished valley. This land was wrecked by you and me. This land is your land, this land is my land. Come on, from polluted ocean to congested island, from the plundered forests to the oil-soaked beaches. This land was wrecked by you and me. I've rambled far, boys, by stinking rivers, past towering wrecks of our auto graveyards. Through the noise of progress, a voice was moaning. This land was wrecked by you and me. This land is your land, this land is my land, from polluted ocean to congested island, from the plundered forests to the oil-soaked beaches. This land was wrecked by you and me. As the sun was straining through the slums and ghettos on the hungry faces in the barren meadows, I saw them falling and I heard them calling. This land was made for you and me. This land is your land, this land is my land, from polluted ocean to congested island, from the plundered forests to the oil-soaked beaches. This land was wrecked by you and me. Yes, this land was wrecked by you and me. But gosh, folks, I wonder if we really want to sing it like that. Wouldn't we rather sing it the way Woody wrote it? Really beautiful words like this. Now here we go. This land is your land, this land is my land, from California to the New York Island, from the redwood forests to the Gulf Stream waters. This land was made for you and me. As I was walking that ribbon of highway, I saw above me that endless skyway. I saw below me the Golden Valley. I said this land was made for you and me. This land is your land, come on, this land is my land. From California to the New York Island, from the redwood forest to the Gulf Stream waters. This land was made for you and me. I've roamed and rambled, and I followed my footsteps to the sparkling sands of her diamond deserts. And all around me a voice was sounding, this land was made for you and me. Now here we go. This land is your land, this land is my land. From California to the New York Island, from the redwood forest to the Gulf Stream waters. This land was made for you and me. As the sun came shining and I was strolling, and the wheat fields waving, and the dust clouds rolling, as the fog was lifting, this voice kept chanting, this land was made for you and me. Now it's your last chance. This land is your land, this land is my land. From California to the New York Island, from the redwood forest to the Gulf Stream waters. This land was made for you and me. Yes, this land was made for you and me.
Children who are learning the Lord's Prayer often amuse us with what they think some of the petitions say. One little boy, as his father was hearing his bedtime prayer, very seriously and with real earnestness prayed, "And forgive us our trash baskets." The facts stagger the imagination. For example, we are told that the United States contains only 5.7% of the world's population, but consumes 40% of the world's production of natural resources. The result of such massive production is massive filth. An article in Time magazine told how each year Americans junk 7 million cars, 100 million tires, 20 million tons of paper, and get this, 28 billion bottles and 48 billion cans. We are also told that we produce about 50% of the world's industrial pollution, and that our 83 million cars cause 60% of the air pollution in the cities. From the perspective of biblical truth, there has been a misinterpretation of the command in the book of Genesis for man to exercise dominion over the earth. He was assigned this role by virtue of his being created in the image of God, the highest and most promising expression of God's creative activity. However, what must not be overlooked or forgotten is that in the process of creation, God saw everything that he had made, and behold, it was very good. In other words, the natural world has its own value and integrity, and must be understood and seen for what it is, and not simply for what it can do for man. Not only does the earth witness to the glory of God, but God takes delight in his own handiwork. Again and again, the psalmist makes clear, especially in the 104th Psalm, that God fashions what is beautiful and awe-inspiring as well as what is useful. O Lord my God, thou art very great, says the psalmist. Thou didst set the earth on its foundations, so that it should never be shaken. Thou dost cause the grass to grow for the cattle, and plants for man to cultivate, that he may bring forth food from the earth, and wine to gladden the heart of man, oil to make his face shine, and bread to strengthen man's heart. So the created world is more than merely a stage setting for the encounter between man and God. Even the Apostle Paul in the 8th chapter of Romans looks to the final redemption of nature as well as man. For the creation, says Paul, waits with eager longing for the revealing of the sons of God, because the creation itself will be set free from its bondage to decay and obtain the glorious liberty of the children of God. Why, even nature itself is exhorted to praise God. Praise the Lord from the earth, says the 148th Psalm. Mountains and all hills, fruitful trees and all cedars, beasts and all cattle, creeping things and flying fowl, let them praise the name of the Lord. There is indeed a kinship between God and his created world. The earth, the sky, and the sea are, as Luther indicates, masks of the divine presence. God is present in his creation, and we must recognize this fact as we relate to the world and everything that is in it. This means there is also a kinship we have with this world, and we must treat it with tenderness and love. This is the thrust and implication of the biblical truth regarding man's assignment as the keeper of the earth. Now granted, man is to be valued more highly than other creatures. He does stand at the pinnacle of creation, but he cannot claim that he stands as the only thing of value. We must remember that other creatures have beauty and value of their own, which they displayed and enjoyed long before man appeared. Therefore, when the command was given that man be fruitful and multiply, and fill the earth and subdue it, and have dominion over every living thing, it was not meant that man thereby has a mandate to go forth and conquer and exploit nature. The fact that man did this very thing before he possessed the technological ability to change his environment on a large scale was only mildly destructive. But today, this has changed. Man's capacity for engineering and manipulating himself and his surroundings has pushed nature to the point that it is striking back with all kinds of revenge tactics. God's created order will not put up with man's unlimited misuse and exploitation of the natural resources. The systems of life are now threatened, even to the point of extinction, unless we of this generation and the immediate generations to come are able to recapture the basic truth of the intrinsic value of all created being, quite apart from its potential for furthering our own particular interests. It must be remembered that God is the giver, the world is the gift, and the gift must be worked with rather than worked over. Now, as Christians, there are some things we will have to do if there is to be any change in the direction of our apparent fate. For one thing, we must begin to live and act as God's stewards, as the guardians and trustees of the earth. Our use of the world's resources, which certainly is our prerogative, must be balanced by our responsibility to cherish them, protect them, and use them carefully. Costs of changing our environment as well as benefits need to be calculated before we go ahead and make the change. We must not only manipulate nature skillfully, but also love it for its own sake. We are, in the words of Scripture, to dress and keep it. It is also becoming quite clear that we must call into question the idea that an annual increase of the gross national product is necessarily the guarantee of an increase in our human well-being. This means, among other things, we will have to re-examine those values and structures which keep insisting that property rights take precedence over human rights, and thereby allow landowners to exploit their holdings simply for personal profit. It might well be said that we will need to develop a new kind of materialism which will replace the consumerism that now goes by that name. Yes, the lifestyles by which we operate will need renovation and changing if we are to survive and find meaning more in the quality rather than the quantity of life, the kind of life God intends us to live as people who are related to the totality of his created world. Any failure to fulfill our obligations as faithful stewards of the gifts of God's creation will certainly bring God's judgment upon us. The battle will not be easy, but our commitment as Christians calls us to act now in our own ways and in our own communities. There is no time for delay. But what is even more incisive is that this world and every living creature in it is an expression of God's inexhaustible grace, which we have come to know so wonderfully in the life and work of his Son, our Lord. And to be sure, Christ is Lord over all.
The incalculable damage in lives lost, health impaired, millions of dollars lost by the economy because of pollution, millions of tax dollars expended because of pollution, gives some indication of the magnitude of our waste of God and nature's wonderful resources. Unfortunately, when we talk in such general terms, the specifics of our waste become lost. I think it's important that we think in specifics. If we don't, we're going to let the pollution issue become lost in the generalities of government and industry efforts. And it takes more than that if we're going to accomplish results. It takes individual efforts. Lake Erie has been cited as a terrifying example of man's waste and greed and what it can do to our natural resources. But what really have we done to Lake Erie? Well, if you were a commercial fisherman on Lake Erie, you'd know what we've done. That is, if you were still in business. As trash fish replaced food fish, the price per pound received by fishermen has been cut in half in the past 10 years. Of 3 food fish once in plentiful supply, there is now a negligible yield. For one, the Cisco, the yield 50 years ago was 35 million pounds. Chlorides in water, an indication of industrial pollution, has tripled in Lake Erie in the past 60 years. Growth of algae, which cuts oxygen and destroys fish life, has multiplied 35 times in the past 30 years. Of Lake Erie's United States shoreline, 1/3 of the bathing beaches are infected with bacterial contamination, and only 3 beaches are listed as absolutely safe. Scientists tell us that our ravaging of Lake Erie has aged this once beautiful body of water 15,000 years in the last half-century. What more dramatic and terrifying illustration of wanton waste and destruction. It's not enough for us to place the blame alone on industrial polluters and absolve ourselves of responsibility. Each must assume his own responsibility. Each must search his own conscience. Each must do his part. In calling for the 1970s to be the environmental decade, I emphasize that we must develop action programs that combine governmental laws and financial commitments with action by the people, especially our youth, to arrest pollution of our environment. As part of the legislative end, I have sponsored 7 major bills on the environment. Several of these deal directly with the problems of water pollution and the problem of solid waste disposal. Another concerns control over fuels and motor vehicle emissions that are responsible for much of our air pollution. Still others relate to general provisions for studies and recommendations on pollution problems. I've also supported substantial increases in funds for sewage treatment facilities. Enactment of these measures will certainly help in the battle against the continued destruction of our environment. In addition to my own legislative work, I want to do all I can, through example and through talks with concerned people such as yourselves, to urge others to become involved in the problem. You as citizens can work effectively by letting your elected representatives know exactly how you feel about the problems of pollution. Your concern, expressions of encouragement, ideas on what can be done, and your support of your representatives' efforts are important. The emphasis, for example, for a measure of federal income tax reform resulted in no small way from the opinions of citizens expressed to members of the United States Congress. Citizen opinion is important. Don't restrict yourself to communications with members of the federal government alone. State and local officials play a part too. Every act of pollution originates from a source under local government jurisdiction. While local governments may not have the enforcement tools and funds to fight the battle by themselves, they are certainly recognizing that they must play an even greater role. But laws and money are not the only answers. Direct citizen participation projects are essential. All of us should be particularly pleased that our young people on the college and high school campuses have become involved in the fight against pollution. There could be no greater nor more relevant issue for our youth to take up as a cause. Citizen projects involving actual work in attacking the problems of pollution are much more meaningful than rhetoric. I think every community has problems that can be attacked by local cleanup projects. I know of one group of young people who undertook the cleaning of a stream in the community. They actually went out and did it. It was a great project because it got people involved and got results. A civic association took on the job of painting, planting, and beautifying a commuter railroad station. There is something that every type of church, fraternal, school, and civic group can do. What better projects for young people than cleaning up streams or vacant lots or streets or beautifying buildings and sites, improving our environment? Because of the nature of the pollution problem, these efforts must be ongoing. They cannot be one-shot affairs in which participants satisfy their consciences and then retire to the sidelines to let others do the battle. I think also that each of us must reassess his own actions. We cannot condemn industry for polluting streams if we throw old tires and empty oil cans into streams. We cannot condemn littering of highways if we flip cigarette butts from cars and throw soda bottles on the side of the road. We cannot condemn airlines for polluting the skies if we burn when we shouldn't and drive around with a leaking auto muffler until the next inspection period. Each of us has a role. Through a variety of things we can do in this battle against pollution.
Will you take a look around you? It's plain to see things are getting serious for you and me. No use waiting for a better time to be, 'cause every day gets worse for you and me. Overcrowding, pollution, guided missiles, you name it. Some of us remember years ago, air sweet and clear, snow white as snow, creeks full of fish, woods a sight to see, birds a-singing in every tree, life was good. Elbow room, clear water, sounds of silence. But the old swimming holes full of tires and muck, catching fish in there take more'n luck. The smog hangs low with nary a breeze, and no birds sing in the silent trees like a graveyard. Ghosts. Silent spring. The bald eagle lays her eggs too thin for a little bald eagle to begin again. The beaver dams are breaking down 'cause the cute little fellers just ain't around. DDT did it all right. Really kills. everything. Now in Africa and India, Biafra and Peru, they're starving in the street, folks like me and you. And right here at home, if we had the heart to see, kids are dying of neglect from you and me. Bloated bellies, rickets, flies in their eyes. Of course, everybody's raising hell mighty mad, and we all agree things are getting bad. We're busy pointing fingers at industry, forgetting the trouble's partly you and me. Car exhaust, detergents, beer cans. Sure, industry's gotta do a clean-up job. Their smog and waste are really playing hob. Better ways of killing bugs than DDT, but folks, it's really up to you and me. Look around us. Start at home. Clean up. 'Cause they ain't gonna understand, and industry and government are holding hands. Take a lot of dough to make air and water free and make life livable for you and me. Smaller armies, fewer missiles. Quit throwing our weight around. But if we get together and start where we're at, admit we're all to blame and stuff like that, we can make Earth clean, the whole Earth free. We can make it fit to live in, you and me. How about it? Let's go, you and me, together.